We're on.
How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the science of fantasy football. Why the science of fantasy football? Well, you get a meteorologist and a biologist together. They're going to use the scientific method. And if you follow the scientific method, you're going to be a much smarter fantasy football player in 2026. And joining me as he does each and every episode. And no, we will not be going away during the off season. This is research season, folks. This is when the real work gets done. He is the fantasy professor. He's a real professor, retired now.
Yeah.
It's John Bush. And John, you get a couple of weeks past the fantasy football season, and you finally have a chance to really digest everything. I don't know about some of these guys that post their hot takes for next season already, but it took me about 2 weeks just to figure out what happened this year.
Yeah, and you and I talked pre-show secret meeting, our secret clubhouse meeting. We had secret data and we had secret questions, and I loved, and I'll just say generically, we have questions that are going to be looked at that we've never really been in a position to really do this year. And I think part of it is you and I have developed a language, a series of metrics based on consistency, but not totally, and just have a view that nobody else that I've seen has. I think Bob Lung, with his consistency guide, would be able to ride in the consistency wagon with us. But a lot of people don't take that ride, Dennis, and we worry about definitions. There's a lot of generic things that we're going to be defining, looking at, and digging, and we'll reveal some of it, not all of it, because we gotta make money and beat people down the road. And but this is a good time for that. And there's some things I have a sense when I do some research, it's like, yeah, I know. And some things, there's one that I'll call it the pink problem, because I labeled this problem the pink problem, and I don't understand why that is now a problem when it didn't used to be. So there's some secret stuff, Dennis, that I won't go into. I'll just say there are things that I think we're going to look at, and our methodologies allow us to do things way different than the usual suspects on Twitter and the radio will be doing.
And different is better, okay? Because different means that we're going to have a unique group of players
Mm-hmm.
that we are going to be considering. And then when we apply ADP
Yes.
analysis, we will understand a lot more of not only who are the best values,
Right.
but we'll understand in a typical draft when we need to make some of the moves that we need to make. But some of the research has really shown me, and without going into details of what we talked about pre-show,
Right.
some of the data has shown me a few things. One is the NFL game is indeed changing.
Mm-hmm.
The way defenses are playing, since Patrick Mahomes was lighting it up with long passes and changing the game where everybody felt like they needed to have that big arm quarterback, defenses are making a change. And if you look at a guy like Matthew Stafford and you look at the number of times that he aired it out more than, let's say, 30 yards,
Right.
that number is not as large as you think it would be. And the reason is because if you look at the number of 25, 30-yard plus plays that the Rams had, it was extraordinary. But so much of that are yards after the catch with Nakua and Devontae Adams, you've got just these two dynamic playmakers, and you got two of them on the same team, and you got a running game that defenses have to respect with Kyron Williams and Blake Corum as the dynamic duo at running back. Right. That combination led to a lot of success for the Rams, and this is a monkey see, monkey do NFL, where if somebody sees that they had success, the defensive coordinators are now like, holy crap, how do I stop that? And they did with Mahomes. Like, they play such a soft secondary now that Mahomes can't light it up deep like he used to. Right. It has nothing to do with the lack of Tyreek Hill. He did it the following year after Tyreek Hill. His percentages, his MVP score, his comm data, everything went up with a lesser wide receiver core. But a minute defenses said, we're not letting you get that deep play anymore. Then Mahomes dropped, and then he came back up when that offense learned how to recreate itself. So the data is telling us that things are changing, but the data that both you and I are looking at, you with your comm and your Bush number and me with my MVP, when I look at the data, it's telling me that this old school way of drafting one quarterback and not caring about a backup in 12-team, one quarterback leagues is probably the wrong way to attack this version of the NFL. Nowadays, you want to have two quarterbacks to choose from and play the matchup game, play the weather game, play the home away game. I think our data is saying that what we're thinking of with strategies and future strategies is right on the money, because we're letting the data guide us to the strategy. And here's where I have a confession that's also my New Year's resolution.
Okay.
For 2026, my fantasy football resolution. And here's the thing is most resolutions are done by about January 9th. I'm not making mine until January 16th. So okay. I know will go, but I did my diary search for my leagues in FFPC, my redraft leagues.
Right.
I know where I made my mistake.
Uh-oh.
I really understand where I screwed up this year.
And what was it? Positional?
It had nothing to do with bad forecasting of players. Okay. It had to do with not trusting my data and your data. If I look at the teams that failed the worst, they were teams where I had written off a guy and I said, I don't want this guy on my team, at his current price. He fell a little bit in the draft and I went to that player. And I shouldn't have, because our data said he was too risky. We did it with Lamar Jackson, where we took him despite saying we're not going early quarterback this year. Late quarterback's where we're going, and we're taking
too enticing.
It was too enticing, but here's my resolution. It's like the old Who song, won't be fooled again. Mm-hmm. I won't make the same mistake twice. It's always been my success in fantasy football. If I'm writing off a guy saying too early in the third round and he falls to the fourth, he's still too early. I am going to wait for 2 whole rounds of drop before I'll even consider that guy again, because if he wasn't a good value in the third round, he shouldn't be considered a good value just 1 round later. That's too quick. Every mistake that I made this year, Professor, it's because guys like Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey dropped farther than I thought they were, and I reconsidered them. Had I stuck to my guns and taken the player that we had targeted at that round, every single situation, my team would have been better. I am going to let 2 rounds minimum go before I even, so in other words, 24 positions in the draft. I'm not gonna dropping 8 spots isn't gonna matter to me. I'm gonna go with who I thought was the best value in that round. Even if another player dropped 6 or 7 or 8 spots, not doing it. I'm going to wait at least 15, more likely 24 spots before that player is now considered a value. If I didn't like him 1 round earlier, I ain't taking him the next round. That to me was a fundamental mistake in logic that I made this year that cost me money. I'm not costing myself money next year.
We probably need to make something. I don't know. In stock market options, you have a stop loss where you exit the game, or so we need like a win entrance, or again 24 spots. We will enter the game now on this player or something.
Yes,
I don't know what we need to call it yet, but sounds like you're calling for a new definition that is what we should apply when we're going to be working together on a few things. And I'm not quite sure what we call it yet, but we need something that we understand what we're saying. And I think, Dennis, not having clarity on that is what got you. In other words, was it 8 picks, 10? 20? In other words, you haven't made that line in the sand yet. Maybe that's what your diary's telling you, that you need kind of a hard and fast, hierarchical rule that we need to develop. And again, I don't know if it's 24, maybe it's 15.
Maybe it's 15. Yeah.
I don't know.
But it's got to be.
I'm loosey-goosey myself with that. I haven't considered defining the floor for a draft player.
And what I think it comes down to is having that decision tree approach.
Yes.
Because what I did was I passed on a guy that I really liked at a particular round. Because that other guy
had dropped,
fell 6 or 8 spots farther than I thought he was going to fall.
So the shiny hook versus the value play, you went for the shiny hook, and you got gigged by it.
I got gigged, and it's not like I get gigged 60% of the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was wrong every single player.
Wow.
Like so in 18 teams, I didn't make that mistake 18 times. Okay. Right. I only made the mistake 6 times out of 18 teams.
Right.
One of those 6 teams made it to the semifinals.
Right.
The others didn't make it to the final 4. So I was, and none of them won championships. The teams that I won championships on, I stuck to my cheat sheet player value.
Right.
That these are the guys I'm looking for in the first round. If they're not there, then I got to look to see who else. Here's the guys I like in the second round.
Right.
And so I think the decision tree needs to be, if there's still guys that I like at a particular round, I'm not looking for the guys that dropped yet.
Define like.
So one of the guys that I really was
No,
high
you
on.
understand. Is that, do
Correct.
you define it by MVP,
Value at ADP. Yeah.
opportunity? You see, we need to get a
Yeah.
little bit more clarity on the definition of like.
So two of the players that I passed on because other guys fell farther than I thought they would.
Mm-hmm.
Puka Nacua,
Mm-hmm.
Sun God,
Mm-hmm.
JSN.
So all wide receivers.
All wide receiver. Most of my mistakes were at wide receiver.
So that means you need extra clarity on wide receivers then.
Correct. And a few at quarterback. Okay, so I made a couple of glaring errors at quarterback because here's what ends up happening is if you enter a draft with the theory you're going late at quarterback and I'm taking two.
Late means
seventh round later.
Seventh round? Okay.
6th or 7th round later.
Okay.
If I had a guy fall into the 3rd or 4th round that I thought was going to be gone in the 2nd or 3rd round,
mm-hmm.
those were the shiny hooks that I hit on. Yeah. And when I say hit, I mean I took the bite on the lure.
Yeah.
And every time it bit me in the rump because the guys I had targeted as my later quarterbacks were usually Stafford and May.
Yep.
They ended up being 1 and 2.
Yep.
Okay. Dak Prescott I ended up getting. So my teams that had Dak, my teams that had Goff, they did just fine. Okay. But the teams where I would have had Stafford or May.
Right.
But now all of a sudden I took Burrow or Hurts instead. It hurt me at 2 positions.
Right.
I didn't do as well at quarterback as I would have, but it especially took away another running back or wide receiver that would have helped my team.
Right.
On a couple of those teams where I realized my mistake in life.
Yeah.
I also overdrafted either a running back or more likely a wide receiver because they fell farther than I thought they would. One of them was Justin Jefferson. Fell into the late part of the 1st round in one of my drafts. I passed on both Puka and the Sun God because I thought I was getting Jefferson as cheap as I'm ever going to get him. Well, he was cheap because the players I was going against understood that he had some risk to him. I said he had risk to him. That's why I didn't have him included in my 1st round group. If I stuck to my grounds there, I would have been right. It's the red flag scenario. Remember, beginning of the draft season, I said, Jamar Chase, makes sense that he's going first in these drafts, but here's why he's risky. In a couple of drafts, I took either Bijan or Gibbs instead of Jamar Chase when I had that first pick in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
That paid off, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I said he was too risky. My range said he was too risky to take as the number 1 pick in fantasy football. And yet I took him in 2 drafts, not listening to my own logic. So this year, 2026, I'm sticking to the cheat sheet. I'm not going to get enticed because a guy who I figured would be gone in the first half of the 1st round is all of a sudden available with pick 11 or 12. I'm sticking with the guys that I thought were the best bargains in the 1st round. And I thought Puka and Sun God were 2 of the best values in the 1st round this year. And you were getting them cheap. And in fact, in one league, I got both of them because I got one at 12 and one at 13. So where I stuck to my gun, did well. Where I let a guy falling just a few spots. Now, if somebody falls 15 spots to me, I'm going to take a look at that player. But I think I'm going to set the minimum at 15. That's a round and a little bit more.
Well, just in your diary, just make that a call.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yes.
note if you deviate from that. Why?
Yes.
In other words,
Yes.
well, 12. I did this because that's fine. You'll have something to look at next year and just say, yep, I got tricked again on a few times.
Yeah. And that's the key is you're not going to be perfect
Nope.
every draft, every season. But if you stay in process, you're going to have success. And I got 14 of my 18 teams at a playoff. So I did something right this year. But the teams didn't survive the playoffs because they had a glaring hole that they wouldn't have had I executed my game plan. It's like the first two rushes don't work and you throw away the running game the rest of the game. You're going to get killed out there in real football. In fantasy football, it's just the same. You got to stay true to your process because the whole purpose of spreading your money out over a larger number of teams is because that eliminates the randomness of an injury or two or three from killing all 18 teams. But if you don't stick with the same process, you've eliminated the advantage of diversifying your money among a wider number of leagues. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to fall for that next year. I'm going to stay in process. And if I'm making this same resolution next year at this time, you can just laugh at me for not being smart.
We will hurl rotten fruit at you at the expo.
There you go.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my resolution.
Yep.
Stay in process because the process that we have developed, it works.
Maybe your opportunity index should have optimal round.
Ooh, I like that.
At least put a flag there with the proviso that you could even do a range. Would consider at this round, only whatever, don't, if you say 10th round, don't pick him at 8, make your probability include some value. I think people, hey, it's a good player, but they sometimes forget value or they go value with this idea, well, he's cheap. Well, it's sometimes at the racetrack, if the obvious even money favorite is 5-1, you do need to think about or somebody knows something that I don't.
Yes.
I mean, it can go either way. It could be a bargain or it could be a trap. So we do need to think about that a little bit, not just, I guess, as long as we don't just jump like, the old reflex hammer with your knee. You just don't, we don't need to be reflexive. We need to be thoughtful. Slow drafts allow us that. And I said on the show that I was on, Game Changers, Dennis, I was asked the question and I said, I referred to having somebody such as you're having a sounding board helps you tease out these hard decisions. So part of your diary may be if you've got 2-3 friends, you need to, even if they don't do it, figure out who's good at quarterbacks or rookies. If why not take advantage of that? Even in your home leagues, maybe what are they doing? It's like, okay, because if you play in other leagues, maybe I missed out over here, but my guy always is hot on rookie running backs. And what did he do? so learn from sounding boards. So Dennis, that's what I think you and I will continue to do this year. People, that's why we do soul drafts, because we're texting, back and forth. And so I'm so glad they don't charge me by the text, Dennis. The old days, they used
Oh
to
yeah.
have a
Yes, they did.
limit.
Yep.
I would have blown that. You and I would have blown that limit.
Oh
We'd be
man,
in trouble. Our
we'd be
wives would have kicked us out. We'd have such a high texting bill, in the old days. But now it's unlimited, all we can eat, and we just go to town.
yeah, we'd be broke. But here's the other. So that's the negative part of the
Okay,
diary.
here's the negative. Tell
So
me the positive.
here's the good part. So the players that we starting lineup decisions.
Yeah.
Okay. The players that you and I discussed at length by text message or even on the show
Mm-hmm.
of, okay, here are my last three guys from my last flex. What, how will this work?
Right.
Our consensus of what we came up with between the two of us, and that was not always
No.
my initial thought of who to start, but putting our logic and our data together and discussing it, I was right 8 out of 10 times. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, that helps.
So that percentage and again, it's not every team every week that we're sitting there going, oh my God, who do we start? Who is this last start? But when we had a question, when I had a question to start, who to start, who to sit, and we discussed it. Now, here's the important thing. Is I understand how daggone smart you are at playing fantasy football. So if you can convince me why I'm wrong with my initial thought, I'll listen to you. And I got no pride, man. If you make me money, I am thrilled that I listened to your logic. And it will take some explanation, it'll take some logic for me to get off my initial thought.
Go ahead.
But when we came up with a consensus between the two of us, we were right. Like it didn't matter what, who started with, if I started with that guy as my initial thought or not, 80% of the time we were right. We had the right guy in the lineup.
A lot of times, Dennis, the positive, it was obvious, but there were times when I remember I would find myself realizing, okay, you got two choices. You got kind of a safe, and you got kind of a wild card that could really deliver or really get you the zero. It was, the spike kind of guy, and you could get the spike, or more the safe, hey, he should get you 10 points versus could get you 18, could get you 2. And sometimes I kind of left it to you to think what do you see your team needed in this position, especially if you'd had some Thursday games going,
yes,
or if it was an afternoon game and the early suite was closed and you needed some upside, then probably the reach might have been the play. Other times, if it's a Thursday game and you always look for who's healthy, and if they're safe and healthy, that can be better than a spiky, questionable guy. Are they even going to play? Are they, got a hurt paw, or what's going on here? So a lot of times, folks, it's not as clear as you think. But what I've found is between our discussion a lot of times we could get it down to something like a safe versus something like a upside reach. And then you make the final call based on what you think you need.
Yeah, and most of the time this year, because again in FPPC we play for
Total
points
points.
only. You're never playing a matchup until the playoffs. So
Yep.
I have no idea if I'm going up against a weak or a tough lineup. I just assume I'm going up against all tough lineups, and I want to finish in the top 6 every week. So I want some level of safety, but I'm not afraid of taking a chance every once in a while. And what we did though with our reasoning is we got to the right volume plays.
Mm-hmm.
And if I look at our analysis of a player, I think there were like 2 times all season where we might have been wrong on volume, and they were all injury. They were both injury related.
Right.
Was it Josh Jacobs not indicated on the injury list late in the season, and he put up a 2-pointer, that kind of a thing. It's if that's the process works, and that's the key is if the process works, we're going to use that process again, and we're going to stick to process, because I do still believe that if you get a consensus look at a tough situation, this was true in weather forecasting, and it's true in fantasy football. It doesn't mean you take a consensus of everybody. What I'm saying is you target to that one person or 1 or 2 people whose opinions are going to be spot on the money with process. And you were my guy that I leaned on this year. And if I had a tough decision, we were right 8 out of 10 times. And again, you notice I didn't say when I followed your advice, I said we ended up with the right pick. It didn't matter to me who was more responsible for that pick, because in the end, it's my team. It's my decision. It's on me.
Right.
Even if you gave me, great advice and I went against it, that's on me. But our reasoning of the whys got us to the right player. And that's why, again, stay on process, folks. You will have much more success than if you're chasing a different process each and every week. So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. Check out my Leaders of the Pack article. We will talk about that in more detail next week as we break down kind of who are some of the failures, who are some of the big hits for this year. And check out some of the professor's data on the matchups for this week's playoff games. Yeah. Head on over to the sportsaffiliation.com. Check out our sister podcast coming up next. It is the Matchup Lab, where we will give you our picks for the big games coming up. And
big race.
Yeah, I still got horse racing on the mind today. Yeah. And head on over to the Science of Fantasy Football next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks.